You remember it. You probably always will. The moment someone said no, the moment you were left out, the moment you reached towards something, a person, a group, an opportunity, and it moved away from you. You told yourself it wasn't a big deal. You told yourself to move on. But your body didn't get that message. Your heart rate spiked, your stomach dropped, your thoughts looped back to the moment again and again, replaying it, dissecting it, looking for what you did wrong. That response was not weakness. It was not oversensitivity. It was one of the most ancient and precisely calibrated survival systems in the human body, firing exactly as designed. And once you understand what rejection actually is, not emotionally, but biologically, you will never experience it the same way again. Here is what nobody tells you about being rejected. Your brain processes it as physical pain, not metaphorically, not as a figure of speech, literally in the same neural circuitry. Neuroscientist Naomi Eisenberger at UCLA ran a now famous study called Cyberball, a simple computer game in which participants were made to feel socially excluded by other players. While they played, their brains were scanned using fMRI. What the scans showed changed how researchers understand the relationship between the social and the physical in human experience. The same brain regions that activate when you experience physical pain, specifically the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula, activated when participants were socially excluded. The brain, in the most literal neurological sense, does not distinguish cleanly between a broken bone and a broken social bond. This is not a design flaw, it is a design feature. Anthropologist Robin Dunbar, whose work on social group size and the evolution of the human brain remains foundational, has argued that for most of human evolutionary history, social exclusion was not just painful, it was lethal. A human being removed from their group in the Paleolithic faced exposure, starvation, and predation with no realistic means of survival. The group was not a social preference, it was the survival infrastructure. Being rejected from it was, in practical terms, a death sentence. Your brain learned this. Over hundreds of thousands of years of selection pressure, the brains that treated social rejection as a genuine physical threat, that responded to it with the same urgency as a broken leg or a predator's bite, were the brains that motivated the behaviors most likely to repair the social bond before it became fatal. The pain of rejection was not a bug, it was the alarm system. And your alarm system is still running. In a world where rejection rarely carries mortal consequences, your brain is still responding to a declined dinner invitation with the same ancient machinery it built to keep you alive when being left out meant dying alone in the wilderness. But here is where it gets stranger. The pain of rejection does something to your cognition that physical pain does not. Psychologist Roy Baumeister, whose decades of research on social rejection and self-regulation have reshaped how we understand human motivation, found that social exclusion produces a specific and remarkable cognitive effect. It temporarily impairs the capacity for intelligent thought. Participants who had been socially excluded performed significantly worse on IQ tests, on analytical reasoning tasks, on tests of self-control and future-oriented thinking. The effect was not small, it was substantial and consistent. Why? Because the rejected brain is not in problem-solving mode, it is in threat response mode. It has redirected cognitive resources away from abstract reasoning and toward the single most urgent task on its ancient agenda, figuring out what went wrong and how to fix it fast enough to get back in the group before the consequences become fatal. Your brain after rejection is not stupid. It is hyperspecialized. Every available resource has been reassigned to the social repair problem. The reason you can't think clearly after being rejected, the reason the thoughts loop and won't stop, the reason you can't concentrate on anything else, is that your brain has correctly identified a survival emergency and mobilized everything it has to address it. The problem is that the emergency is almost never as real as the alarm suggests. Psychologist Kipling Williams at Purdue University has spent years studying what he calls the need to belong, the fundamental human drive for social connection that underlies most human motivation. His research shows that even brief, trivial social exclusion, being ignored in a conversation, being left out of a group text, losing a game of cyberball against strangers you will never meet, produces measurable drops in 4 fundamental needs: belonging, self-esteem, meaningful existence, and sense of control. 4 foundational pillars of psychological functioning, shaken by a social slight that lasts less than a minute. This is the cost of carrying a survival system calibrated for a world where every social slight could cascade into permanent exile. The sensitivity that kept your ancestors alive in their groups is the same sensitivity that makes a read receipt without a reply feel like a wound. Now here is the truth drop, and it reframes something you have probably been doing wrong every time you've been rejected. The standard advice after rejection is to move on. Let it go. Don't take it personally. This advice is neurologically illiterate. You cannot simply decide not to feel rejection intensely, because the intensity is not generated by your conscious mind. It is generated by ancient subcortical machinery that your conscious mind does not have direct access to. Telling yourself not to feel rejected is like telling your hand not to pull back from a flame. The reflex fires before the instruction arrives. What the research actually supports is something different. Eisenberger's own follow-up work showed that one of the most effective interventions for social pain is the same as one of the most effective interventions for physical pain: social support. The presence of another person, a friend, a trusted ally, even a brief positive interaction with a stranger, measurably reduces the neural activation associated with social exclusion. The alarm system can be quieted not by ignoring it, but by giving it what it is actually asking for. Evidence that you are not alone, that the group has not fully closed against you, that the social bond is still intact somewhere. Your ancestors didn't move on from rejection by being stoic. They moved on by going back to the fire, by finding the people who were still there, by reestablishing connection where connection was still available. The rejection you remember, the one that still surfaces sometimes without warning years later, did not damage you. It activated a system that was built to feel catastrophic, precisely because for most of human history, it was. The system worked exactly as designed. The situation just didn't match the alarm level. So what do you do with this? The next time rejection hits, and it will, notice the alarm without obeying it completely. Name what is happening in your brain. Ancient threat response machinery activating in a context it was not built for. Don't try to think your way through it in the moment, because your cognitive resources have been temporarily redirected away from abstract reasoning. Don't isolate, because isolation confirms the alarm and deepens the pain. Instead, go back to the fire. Find one person, one connection, one piece of evidence that the group is still there. You remember the rejection. You probably always will, but now you know what your brain was actually doing with it. And the alarm, once understood, is a little easier to hear without completely believing it.